For Latin 2302, Intermediate Latin 2, Virgil and Italy, at Trinity University, Spring 2020, this is Dr. Benjamin Eldon Stevens. This presentation is on some of the most common ways in Latin for describing space, place, and direction. We can roughly divide them into two big categories. Cases, that is, declined forms of nouns that refer to place or direction, whether on their own, via the case ending alone, or when governed by a preposition, and what are called directional adverbs, that is, non-nouns that refer to place or direction. For each category, our goal is to organize the usages into a chart. Here's the chart we'll aim at for the case usages. And here's the chart for directional adverbs. Each chart will be much bigger at the relevant portion of the presentation. To motivate the charts, let's start by summarizing each category. Cases that describe place or direction include accusative for motion towards, ablative for motion from, and locative for location at. Accusative and ablative appear both with and without prepositions, while locative is always without preposition, and in the classical language, appearing only in a few fixed examples. The directional adverbs will specify a combination of direction and location. For example, in the direction of here, that is, to this place. They'll cover the full range of combinations. There are also some other fixed forms that describe direction or location, like quo, to what place. A bit like the locative, those fixed forms are relatively few. We'll first look at the relevant cases, starting with the accusative. Its relationship to direction is implicit in the name, which comes from the verb meaning to blame or to point out someone or something as a cause. So the accusative has an implicit sense of motion towards, even an aggressive motion towards. Thus, the accusative can be used on its own, without preposition, to describe the goal or the limit of motion. Some examples are domum, to the home, rurem, to the countryside, and urbem, to the city. The accusative can also be used to describe place or direction when governed by prepositions. A lot of prepositions are relevant here, a few dozen in all, so on the slide are just some of the most common prepositions that govern the accusative to describe place or direction. Note that many of these draw on the basic meaning of the case, motion towards. By contrast, the ablative. Etymologically, the ablative is from afferro, the verb meaning to carry away from or to carry out of. Thus, the ablative on its own can be used for a point of origin or a location that is a source of something. By metaphorical extension, it can become the cause of something or the means of an action. Mostly, however, for place and direction, the ablative is governed by prepositions. Like with the accusative, for the ablative too there are a lot of those prepositions, and on the slide again are just some of the most common. Note that while some draw on the basic meaning of the case, motion from, like ab, de, or ex, others change it up, specifying location, like in, or relative position, like pro or sub. An interesting contrast is sub with accusative versus sub with ablative. With the accusative, sub can mean approaching something taller or looming, for example, sub diem, approaching the day, therefore at dawn. With the ablative, sub more usually means under something, for example, sub axe, therefore beneath the axis of the day. Here too there can be metaphorical extensions. For example, sub specie aeternitatis, underneath, that is, supervised by, the view from eternity. Finally, among the cases describing place or direction is the locative. Etymologically, of course, it means located or placed. One of the 8 cases in prehistoric Proto-Indo-European, in Latin the locative is vestigial, that is, it appears only in traces and is not productive, such that no new uses of the locative could be generated in the classical language. So, there is only a handful of fixed forms and expressions using the locative, including certain common locations, again home, domi, countryside, ruri, and city, urbi, among others, and idioms like the Roman expression for domestic and international politics or at home and abroad, domi militiaeque. Since we're discussing space and direction, it's helpful to organize the relevant case usages in a spatial diagram. Our diagram has a notional location, the dot at the center, and 3 possible directions: to, at, in, on, and from. Hopefully it's clear where the relevant cases go. Accusative for to, ablative and locative for at, in, on, and ablative also for from. Most fundamental is the distinction between accusative and ablative. Again, accusative for motion to, ablative for both location at and motion from. With that in mind, we can list relevant prepositions under each case heading. Again, these are only examples, and of course there are other strictly spatial preposition case combinations. For example, circum plus the accusative, meaning around. So, you might wish to expand the lists and make your own diagrams. We turn now from nouns to non-nouns that describe place or direction, called directional adverbs. We'll organize these directional adverbs in a chart. With 3 rows for 3 locations, which should be familiar from personal subjects and demonstrative pronouns, here, nearest the first-person speaker, the sound h. There, close to a second person or addressee, the sound ist. And farther or over there, not near to speaker or addressee, but near a notional third person, the sound il. We'll multiply those rows by 3 columns, each indicating a direction or location. To, the sound ook. At, the sound eek. And from, the sound ink. Taking the rows as providing roots, and the columns as providing suffixes, we get these products. 9 directional adverbs covering the full range of places relative to a first-person speaker and directions relative to that place. You might read through the chart to start locking down especially what the suffixes mean, since those are likely newer to you than the roots, which, again, appear in the demonstrative pronouns. Hook, heek, hink, istuk, istik, istink, illuk, illik, illink. Finally, we can also identify question words, interrogative adverbs that can be classified under the same directions. Although obviously they don't use the same sounds, quo is direction towards, asking whither, ubi is location at, asking where, and unde is direction from, asking whence. We've now covered the 2 big categories of how Latin most commonly refers to space, place, and direction. Review as much as you need to, and look both backwards and forwards in your texts for examples.